501c3 nonprofit corporation that was formed to inspire, educate, and provide support for youth and young adults who are suffering from addiction, depression, sexual and gender identity issues, and abuse. So this workshop is obviously about bipolar. I have bipolar. If you don't have to raise your hand if you're not comfortable with your diagnosis. If you are, but just I'm curious, how many are diagnosed bipolar in this room? Great. Okay. Awesome. So what I'd like to do to start is I just want to show you a little bit of a promo reel for my nonprofit, so you have a little bit of understanding the background and why I do what I do, basically. And then we'll get into the presentation. How's that sound? Is that okay with you guys? All right, awesome. Hi, my name is Torri Shack. I'm the president and founder of Tangible Movement. We are a 501c3 nonprofit corporation that was formed to inspire, educate, and provide support for youth and young adults who are suffering from addiction, depression, sexual and gender identity issues, and abuse. I want to come into your school to help your students understand that you can live with mental illness, and it is okay to be mentally ill. I want to defeat the stigma of mental illness and everything that goes along with it. Sexual and gender identity issues, suffering from abuse. Worldwide, 10 to 20% of young people are diagnosed mentally ill. Half of all mental illness begins at age 14, and 3/4 by their mid-20s. 30% of teens who are diagnosed depressed will also develop a substance abuse problem. Teens who are depressed are also 12 times more likely to attempt suicide. 18% of gay, lesbian, bisexual students have reported being raped at some point in their life. That is 3 times the likelihood of their straight counterparts. 30% of gay, lesbian, and bisexual students have attempted suicide. That is 4 times the likelihood of their straight counterparts. And 60% have reported feeling sad or hopeless at some point in their life. That is twice the rate of their straight counterparts. I am the statistic. At age 14, I was diagnosed severely depressed. At age 14, I started using drugs and alcohol. At age 14, I started cutting. At age 15, I was admitted to my first psychiatric institution for attempted suicide. At age 17, I was admitted to my first rehabilitation center for drugs and alcohol abuse. And the saga continued because I was not willing to accept the fact that I was mentally ill. So I used drugs and alcohol to cover up how I was feeling inside. And I know your students are going through the same thing. I want to help your students by giving them tools and resources so that they don't feel like they are alone. So they know that there is a solution out there. There is help for them. My name is Torri Shack. I am with Tangible Movement. Please help me end the stigma of mental illness. And visit www.tangiblemovement.org to book me today. Thank you. All right. So that's a little bit about what I do as far as my nonprofit is concerned. We'll go ahead and get into the presentation. So, let me see where I can stand, where I can see this. Can you guys see over me if I stand here? Okay. So, what I'm going to do, you can go ahead and click to the next slide. So these are topics that are going to be covered today. Just out of curiosity, are most of you guys from the Davis area? All right. So did anybody travel from outside of Davis other than myself? Or where'd you come from? San Francisco. All right, awesome. And where'd you?
Fresno.
Okay, and?
Manteca. Elk Grove, not that far.
Elk Grove. Where?
Manteca.
Where's that?
San Joaquin County.
Okay, all right. Anybody else? All right, so I live in LA. I drove up a little 6-hour drive from Santa Monica, to be with you guys. So, yeah, you're welcome. So I wanted to cover a bunch of different topics today. I'm going to go into my personal story. I'm going to go into a personal story of another friend of mine who shared her story with me. She has bipolar 1. What is the level of experience with bipolar in the room? Can you raise your hand if you're like a beginner, don't really know that much about it? Okay, go ahead, raise your hand. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Put them up. Put them up. All right, what about intermediate levels?
all right? And who would say that they were advanced? Okay, so a good mix. So I am not a doctor, all right? I am simply somebody who's done a lot of research on mental illness as far as my nonprofit is concerned. I have done a lot of research throughout my entire life on bipolar disorder, since that is what I am. I just came to terms with the fact that I am bipolar a couple of years ago when I started the nonprofit organization. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but I'm gonna go ahead and cover a couple topics, and then we'll go into some personal stories and then some question and answers and see how that goes. How does that sound? Good? All right. So we're gonna cover bipolar disorder, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, cyclothymic disorder, cyclothymic disorder. I have a really hard time saying that. Bipolar disorder not otherwise specified, or NOS. The epidemiology, etiology, clinical manifestations, and management of each disorder will also be covered, personal stories and other facts and statistics. Okay, next slide. So what is bipolar disorder? All right, first of all, do you guys know that there's about 4, sometimes people will now say 5 different types of bipolar? You guys are aware of that? All right. So bipolar disorder, also known as manic depressive illness, is a brain disorder that causes unusual shifts in mood, energy, activity levels, and the ability to carry out day-to-day tasks. Next slide. The different disorders are bipolar 1 disorder, bipolar 2, cyclothymic disorder, bipolar disorder non otherwise specified. I had a really bad speech impediment when I was younger. I had a horrific stutter. I had to go to speech therapy for it. It was actually, it actually happened right after I got out of my first treatment center. So I stumble over a few words, and that one, cyclothymic, is a very difficult one for me to get out, so bear with me, okay? And there are other disorders that I'll cover within these disorders, like rapid cycling, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure some of you are much more well-versed in bipolar disorder since you're at school, UC Davis, and studying this. So just if you have some things you would like to add to the presentation or add as far as your questions and answers, I'd be happy to hear you out. Okay, next slide. So bipolar 1 is defined by manic episodes that last at least 7 days, or by manic symptoms that are so severe that the person needs immediate hospital care. Usually depressive episodes occur as well, typically lasting at least 2 weeks. Episodes of depression with mixed features, having depression and manic symptoms at the same time are also possible. So mixed symptoms. Who in here is bipolar 1? Anybody? 1, 2, okay. And just out of curiosity, how early were you diagnosed?
4 years ago.
Okay, and then yourself?
2 years ago.
Okay, and then one back there? Yep.
4 years ago.
4 years ago, okay. And then one over to the right? No? Okay, just curious. All right, so the criteria for manic episodes are 3 to 4, the following criteria that are required during the elevated mood period: highly inflated or grandiose self-esteem, decreased need for sleep or rested after only a few hours of sleep, pressured speech, racing thoughts and flights of ideas, easily distractible, failure to keep attention, increased goal-directed activity, high excess involvement in pleasurable activities, sex, travel, spending money. All right, next slide. So the lifetime prevalence is 0.4 to 1.6%. The ratio of males and females affected is equal, which I find pretty interesting. 2 to 3 million American adults are diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And NIMH estimates that 1 in every 100 people will develop the disorder. Next slide. Etiology of bipolar disorder. Genetic studies indicate that bipolar 1 disorder is associated with increased bipolar 1 and major depressive episodes in first-degree relatives. Mania can be precipitated by psychological stressors, sleep-wake cycle changes. I have a lot of friends who are bipolar 1, and they swear up and down they think that bipolar 1 is actually a sleep disorder. A lot of them are triggered by lack of sleep and stressors that go along with sleep. And I'll get into that too as well, as far as my friend whose story I'm going to share with you guys, who is bipolar 1. Okay, yeah, you can go ahead. Clinical manifestations of bipolar 1 disorder defined by the occurrence of a manic episode. A single manic episode is sufficient enough to meet diagnostic criteria, but most patients have recurrent manic episodes mixed with depressive episodes. The first episode of mania usually occurs in the early 20s, and lifetime suicide rates range from 10 to 15%. Okay. Children can also present with bipolar disorder that resembles the adult type but differs according to their age and developmental level. Very young children may present with uncontrollable giggling. School-age children may try to teach their grammar classes in presence of their teachers. So I have bipolar too, but for this, I was absolutely this. I was uncontrollable. I caused so much craziness in all of my classes. I would raise my hand to get out of class, and then I would go. There'd be like a little window for my other friends' classes. I'd go and dance in front of their classes and cause all sorts of ruckus. I had a teacher who was deaf in one ear, so I thought it was really funny to make animal noises, and she had no idea where they were coming from. So I was obviously causing her a lot of trauma. I was in Sunday school or Saturday school, whatever that was, like every weekend. I was in detention constantly. I was just an absolute nightmare of a kid. And I have a co-occurring disorder, which is our ADHD, so that combined with the bipolar was just a recipe for disaster. I ended up not graduating from high school. I mean, I didn't get a walk. So what I did is I thought it'd be a really good idea to mix a bunch of paint and water and throw it over the lockers, and it landed over both deans. So I was not allowed to walk in my graduation. This is just a little bit of the chaos that bipolar disorder causes as far as in adolescence. And the uncontrollable giggling, like that's light compared to what a lot of bipolar kids experience and how you can recognize them as far as their behavioral situations are. Adolescents may present with severe anger outbursts and agitation. I was kicked out of my high school before that situation I just told you about for fighting. I ended up punching the dean in the face, and that's pretty good reason to get kicked out, So talking about anger, I had severe anger issues, severe. That just gives you a little insight into that area. Most children with bipolar disorder have more than one relative with the same condition. So my mom is a hoarder, and we were going through her stuff because I had to move her from a place in Orange County up to the high desert because I helped pay for my parents. And my entire life, I did not know what was wrong with her up until about a year ago. She was constantly like, she'll be up all night long, and then she'd be crashed and be passed out for like a week straight. And she would, go to the PTA meetings and take full control and do like every single possible thing you could possibly imagine with the PTA stuff. And then she would just be in bed for the next week. So we're going through her hoard, and I come across her prescription from 1985. Mind you, she's a hoarder, so she keeps all the stuff, okay, for lithium. And I'm like, Mom, what is this? Are you bipolar? And she's like, well, yeah, your dad, they diagnosed me back then and they gave me lithium, but your father told me I was not allowed to take the medication because bipolar people are crazy. And I'm not crazy and I'm not allowed to take the medication. So she didn't take the medication, and so for my entire life, she was unmedicated, bipolar. And I'll get into that because my dad did the same thing with me, which is the reason for my long history of craziness. From the time that I was initially diagnosed up until just recently, a couple of years ago, because I also was, my dad did not think I was bipolar, and I was not allowed to take the medication that was prescribed to me for bipolar, and so I self-medicated a lot. Okay, go ahead and next slide. So antipsychotics, antidepressants, mood stabilizers like Lamictal and lithium, and a combination therapy is obviously more effective. Having regular therapy and a psychiatric therapy as well is ways to treat bipolar disorder, okay? And suggested strategies for bipolar disorder. This is where my nonprofit really comes into place. Like, I really want to help people. In my regular money-making career, I'm a personal trainer, okay? I've spent the last 4 years, the last couple years, I travel with my clients. I work with a lot of high-profile R&B artists, so I travel all over the world with them. So that is why I believe health and fitness and wellness is a huge component in making sure that the bipolar mania and depressive episodes are managed properly. So to control stress, stress is a major bipolar trigger, obviously. Stress is a trigger for most people who don't even have bipolar. Keeping a regular schedule is really important. Sticking to routine to help control mood swings. And the mood swings I'll get into, there's something called bipolar rage, which is not really talked about a lot, and I'll get into that as well. Practice healthy sleeping habits. Cannot stress that enough. Absolutely have to get, a good, I would suggest, if you can possibly, I know you guys are all in school, most of you are in school, but 8 hours of sleep if you are bipolar to help control the mood and the ups and downs. And get moving. Exercise is 100,000 times more helpful than anything else on here, except for your medications, of course. But my bipolar manifests itself with deep depressive episodes, very, very deep. And no matter how deep they are, I'll go through a month where I won't work out or whatnot, but I will force myself to get out and do something, to walk, to go on a small jog or a hike, just because I know better now that that's going to help get me out of that depressive episode sooner. Get moving. Avoid caffeine, alcohol, and drugs. Well, I've been sober for 7 years. I drink caffeine like it's going out of style. Okay? I got to have something. You know what I mean? Come on, give me something here. And journaling is a huge, huge blessing for people with bipolar, to get your feelings and the thoughts out of your head and onto paper. Okay, go ahead and next slide. Okay, so what I want to do is, my friend, Brooke, shared her story with me. So she's also a big advocate of mental health and dual diagnosis. How many of you in here understand or have an idea of what psychosis is? Okay, does anybody know really what it's like to be in a state of psychosis, who are not bipolar? So I'm going to read to you what her story is, so you guys have an understanding. I think it's a really brilliant way to describe what it's like to be in this state of psychosis. And I'll laugh at a lot of things, just because if I'm not laughing at ridiculous, crazy things, then I might as well just get in a box and wait to die. Okay, because you have to laugh. You have to laugh at some of this stuff because it's crazy. It's absolutely insane, the things that we have to go through in life in general in order to, kind of figure out what it is that we need in order to help basically get us through the day. And for me, it's laughter. It's laughter. So this is her story. It's Brooke. I trudged through the end of Santa Monica Beach, awaiting the celebration, which was to ensure upon my arrival. And me and her laugh about her story, okay? So I'm not just so you know. We have laughed a lot about her story. The beach was filled with spectators as I went to the shore to set up shop. I laid out my beach towels and camouflage workout gear. I scattered shells and crystals about with magic powers that only I was aware of. I threw my angel cards up in the air as if they were whisked away by the breeze of moments yet unfolded. I took 2 rose quartz hearts and placed them in a dream box and hurled into the roaring sea. This represented my one true love coming back to me. I knew that God had prepared me for this mission, but I did not know where I was going, who I was going to become, or who I was waiting for. All I knew was that God was everything and that I trusted her with my heart and soul. I believed my day had come. I had arrived. As I pranced down the Venice Beach boardwalk, all of my senses were in overdrive. I could feel the warmth of the sunshine as it beamed down on my chest and roasted my shoulders to a deep shade of bronze. My eyes glistened with the reflection of the waves as they danced in my imagination. My brain was preoccupied with every detail and its synchronicity. Life seemed to leap out of my heart, yet paralyzed in time and space. I felt the love and tenderness from a God I seemed to personally know in that moment. Over the crashing of the waves came the Pearl Jam song, Alive. I circled the dock around and around as if I was the Mad Hatter's birthday party in Alice in Wonderland. I tossed my passport into the ocean. Where I was going, I wouldn't need it. I ran to the beach and dove into the water, standing precariously. I felt like a mermaid trying to balance on the shore. I tasted the salt in the back of my throat as I gulped and swallowed hard to the refreshing taste of losing your place in summer. I stared up at the sun through my manic mink eyelashes as I fell to my knees to pray. The sand and surf were soft. I clasped my hands together, knelt my head down, and thanked God for every misstep, every perceived wrong that had gotten to the point where I knew God was the way, for I was God, and I was profoundly grateful to have found her deep within myself. The love that I felt as nature nurtured me will be remembered forever as one of the greatest moments I have ever known. Was I really the reincarnation of Isis? I was at the mall with my mom on Palm Sunday, yearning for the day to end. When would she find out that I was the Messiah? I had a theory, a well thought out and precisely measured theory that I was not your average girl. I believed I was superhuman, born with an extra X chromosome. I was the next generation of feminism, the original tomboy, the Egyptian goddess Isis. I told my mom that I had to go to the hospital. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to let them test my DNA. I had to prove to the world that I was the person they were waiting for. I knew that UCLA was in on it. I knew they were waiting for me, so I asked my mom to pull over on 16th Street. She stopped the car and I walked with purpose into the emergency room. I knew the timing had come for me to surrender to the feeling of panic. It was my turn to sacrifice myself the way Jesus had done 2,500 years ago. I calmly asked for a DNA test when I was seated. The nurses in the hospital were not amenable to my request. They told me to sit down, and the confusion began to sweep over me as if the waves I had frolicked in Santa Monica had followed me and had suddenly crashed through the doors of the hospital to wash away my God consciousness. They said things like mania and bipolar. No, I thought, not now. How could this happen on the day that I was to save humanity? I was there to check myself into a safe haven, to be guarded by the most important doctors in the world with my secret, not to be treated like a person with psychosis. I was a saint. I was Jesus Christ. So she believed that she was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. And the story goes on to say that when she was brought into the back room, she felt she was not getting the proper care, and she felt like the higher-ups at UCLA didn't know she was there. So she needed to create a scene, and she jumped on one of the techs' backs. And they restrained her, obviously, and hospitalized her. It's very interesting. I've known Brooke for a long time. She's also sober now. And like I said, she's a huge advocate, and she gave me permission to share her story in here. But for those of you that don't understand psychosis, that's just a little bit of an inlet of what it would be like to experience that full-fledged break from reality. So I just wanted to share that with you guys so you have a little bit of an idea. Now we'll go into the Bipolar 2 disorder, which is what I have. Anybody here have Bipolar 2? 1, 2, awesome. We're winners. Actually, we're not. I really wish I had the Bipolar 1 because I would really love to experience that mania. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know. Bipolar 2 disorder is similar to Bipolar 1 in that, except that mania is absent. So we don't get to have the whole mermaid experience and the Jesus-like experience. We don't get that. Hypomania is the essential diagnostic finding. Hypomania is a milder form of elevated mood than mania, okay? The clinical manifestations of Bipolar 2 disorder, characterized by the occurrence of hypomania and episodes of major depression in an individual who has never met the criteria for mania or mixed state. Hypomania is determined by the same symptom complex as mania, but the symptoms are less severe, cause less impairment, and usually do not require hospitalization. Bipolar is cyclic. Suicide occurs in 10 to 15% of patients, same as Bipolar 1, more common in women. Okay? So I'm just going to share a little bit about my story so you have a firm understanding of what Bipolar 2 is like and how it manifests for me. Does anybody have any questions at this time? So far? None? So I was first diagnosed actually bipolar when I was 14. Like I said, my father said that I was not bipolar because bipolar people are crazy and I was not allowed to take that medication. And so I was put on just regular antidepressants, which does not work for somebody with bipolar. I was struggling with my sexuality. I'm clearly gay. If you guys didn't pick that up, I don't know. Okay. Now, I don't know if you guys know much about Orange County, California, but that's where I'm from. Very, very conservative town. My dad was a complete and total racist and a homophobe. Yeah, and I went to Catholic high school because I was getting in trouble in junior high, so I'm Jewish. But my father felt that the nuns would be able to handle me better. So they sent me to Catholic school, okay? I ended up actually having my first entrepreneurial experience there, selling drugs to all of the rich Catholic school kids. That was my first job. It was marijuana, which was legal back then. I am 39 years old. I look young because I take a lot of naps, okay? So when I was 14, I started cutting. I was uncomfortable with my own skin. I just wanted to rip my skin off, and I suffered from severe depression. And the hypomania, now I know in hindsight, which was basically just me acting out in school, I would just get these rushes of energy, and I couldn't contain myself. I couldn't sit still. It was far more complex than ADHD. And I got in so much trouble in high school. It was ridiculous. I would spend the day at lunchtime running around and jumping in and out of trash cans. I don't know. For real, that's what I would do. It seemed like a good idea at the time. So I decided that I didn't want to be gay, and that being gay was like the worst thing on the earth. I was a total internal homophobe. So I tried to kill myself by slicing my wrists. And so I was institutionalized the first time when I was 15 years old, and I don't remember what they diagnosed me with, but I was still diagnosed depressed. Fast forward, I decided I moved up from my sales job to selling methamphetamine. I got a promotion, okay? So I was doing a lot of meth and selling meth, and it was great for my ADD. It was really good for my ADD. I was able to actually pass a bunch of classes that I had failed out of before. So for a while it worked until it didn't work. And I was institutionalized for that. At this time I was still on antidepressants, going on and off these antidepressants, on and off, but using methamphetamine and whatever drug I can get my hand on. I managed to pull myself together. I dealt more drugs when I was in college. I went to UCSB, and I graduated to pills at that time because the doctors were giving me all these pills. So I was just using, my daily cocktail for about 10 years was in the morning would be Ritalin and Vicodin. I would smash that up and snort that all day long. And then I'd be taking benzos all day, Klonopin, Ativan, Xanax, and then I'd top it off with a little bit of Ambien at the end of the night. So I was using that and selling that, but I managed to get straight A's in college. I ended up interning in the White House under President Clinton doing this. So if any of you guys suffer from addiction or have any kind of addictive personality characteristics, there is a period of time that it works and then it doesn't work anymore. So it stopped working for me, and my depression absolutely took over my life as far as after I was not able to manage it anymore with my drinking and using. I'll fast forward a little bit, and I developed a severe eating disorder. And I tried to get sober a number of times between the ages of 20 and 33. And I ended up relapsing at all those times because I couldn't manage my depression, I couldn't manage my drug and alcohol usage, and the eating disorder at the same time. So 7 years ago, I was traveling with a client. I was in a hotel room in New York City, and I decided that was it. I couldn't live on this planet anymore with the feelings that I had, the severe depression that I had. Felt like I wanted to rip my skin off. The drugs weren't working, nothing was working anymore, so I attempted an overdose in the hotel room. My eating disorder saved my life. I ended up waking up the next day, coming to. The whole room looked like a football team had come in there and had like a pizza party. There's like pizza on the wall, there's donuts smashed into the bed. Everything, like food everywhere. The minibar was tore apart. I don't remember any of this, but I ate myself out of my overdose. That's the only thing that I can say that saved my life. So I decided at that moment that I was gonna go into treatment. I flew back home and went to treatment 7 years ago, and I've been sober ever since, 7 years. Now here comes the depression, the bipolar really starts hitting me. After I got out of treatment, I was on the couch for 6 months. I could not function. I absolutely could not do anything. I couldn't wash a dish. I couldn't do laundry. I was useless. I couldn't hold a job. My girlfriend at the time, who I met in treatment, which is a great place to meet a girlfriend. I asked her, how many times have you been in treatment? She's like, 27 times, not including 16 psychiatric stays. I'm like, great, that's my wife. I'm going to marry her. That's what I thought, for real, because I'm like, this girl gets me, okay? She's going to get me. She got me. So I'm on the couch, like on the 8th month. All I would watch is Law and Order SVU, over and over, and Forensic Files. Olivia Benson, I'm in love with, okay? And I even had a little crush on Detective Stabler. Yeah, I know. He has the wrong equipment, but I still had the crush on him. So she was like, doesn't it sound nice to have somebody just cook, you have your food prepared and have you coffee, every morning and da-da-da-da. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, I really think you need to be hospitalized for your depressive disorder. And so I was like, okay, sure. So I entered into UCLA psychiatric and for major depressive disorder. And I was sober. I did this to maintain my sobriety. In there, they told me I was bipolar 2. I said, no, I'm not. And I refused to take the medication that was prescribed to me. A couple years later, I saw another doctor. He says, you're bipolar 2. I'm like, all right, let's just give this a whirl then. So that's when I finally came to terms with the fact that I'm bipolar. I didn't want to be labeled bipolar. And I started taking Lamictal. I had a really bad reaction to Lamictal, but it was like, while it was working, it was like the best drug that ever could have possibly worked for me. And then I saw a different doctor who I see today, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna test this out. I'm just gonna go in and present my symptoms and see what she says. I'm not gonna let her know that any other doctors, label me bipolar 2. Went in there, she's like, you're bipolar 2. I'm like, okay, all right, fine, I give up. I surrender. I surrender to this. And that was about 3 years ago. And coming to terms with that was very, very difficult for me because my father told me that people are crazy who are bipolar. And the way that my hypomania manifests itself in my adult life is like this. I woke up one morning and I decided I wanted to go buy a motorcycle. Thought it would be a really great idea to go buy a motorcycle. I go down to the motorcycle place. I have $3,000. I'm like, I want to buy this motorcycle. He's like, well, let's try to get you financed. I'm like, great. So they finance me. He's like, oh, you're approved. I'm like, great. Let's get this $20,000 motorcycle. I'm like, sounds like a great idea. So I get on the bike. I can't even sit on it. I can't put my feet on the ground. And I'm like, great, I'll take it. I'll take it. Sounds like, this is great, right? Great idea. In my head, everything's like a great idea. And as soon as I walk off the lot, this wave of this cloud of despair comes over me immediately. Realizing what I had done. I go home and I lay in bed for like 2 days. I didn't go pick up the bike in this depressive episode. And I call my dad, who's an attorney. I'm like, look, I know you don't think I'm crazy, but I did something crazy, and I need your help. And he helped me get out of that contract. But that's kind of how the difference between what the story I just shared with my friend Brooke, thinking that she's Jesus Christ, and then the story of me having impulse issues as far as like just going and buying a motorcycle, a $20,000 motorcycle I can't afford and I couldn't even get on. So that's how my hypomania manifested for myself. Okay, so we're gonna go through number 3. Cyclothymic disorder is a recurrent, chronic, and milder form of bipolar disorder in which mood typically oscillates between hypomania and dysthymia. If a manic episode or depressive episode is experienced, cyclothymic disorder is not diagnosed. Okay? Clinical manifestations of cyclothymic disorder. Cyclothymic disorder is a milder form of bipolar disorder consisting of recurrent mood disturbances between hypomania and dysthymic mood. A single episode of hypomania is sufficient enough to diagnose cyclothymic disorder, although most individuals also have dysthymic periods. Cyclothymic disorder is never diagnosed when there is a history of mania, major depressive episodes, or mixed episodes. Bipolar not otherwise specified, or bipolar NOS. Defined by bipolar symptoms that do not match the 3 categories of bipolar 1, bipolar 2, or cyclothymia. The diagnosis of bipolar not otherwise specified is indicated when there is a rapid change days between manic and depressive symptoms and can also include recurring episodes of hypomania. Bipolar not otherwise specified may be diagnosed when it is difficult to tell whether bipolar is the primary disorder due to other general medical conditions, such as a substance abuse problem. Okay? Risk factors. Scientists are studying the possible causes of bipolar disorder. Most agree that there is no single cause. Instead, it is likely that there are many factors that contribute to the illness or the increased risk. Brain structure and functioning, genetics, and family history. Next. We'll go into this in a second. Do you guys have any questions so far? You can ask anything you like. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, what medication are you on now?
Sure. I take 5 medications, and I'll explain that. I am on lithium, Abilify, and Wellbutrin, and then I also have to take 2 thyroid medications because the lithium affects my thyroid. So I don't know the names of them, but that's what I'm on now. Any other questions? I had one over here.
Yeah. I know when you're in either hypomania or a manic episode, it's harder to keep people who've been diagnosed with bipolar on their medication.
Yes.
Do you have any recommendations? I'm in the master's program to become a marriage and family therapist. Do you have any recommendations as far as like how to talk to them about staying on their meds?
Yeah, and I've dealt with friends of mine who are bipolar 1 who want to go off their medication. And make sure they're sober. Okay, so if they're using any kind of drugs, try to get them sober into a sober state of mind first. Remind them of personal, like if you have any kind of personal stories of how the bipolar has affected you, with as far as what their bipolar has done to you, how it's affected you. Remind them of that. Remind them of, basically what trouble they get into when they go off their medication and how it affects everybody around them. That's the best, basically, the best advice that I can give. They're going to do what they're going to do.
Right.
But creating a larger picture rather than just them selfishly wanting to go off their medication because they feel better and they want to go into that manic state, will help open their eyes a little bit and make them think twice about going off their medication.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Had another question over here?
Do you know what the difference between the bipolar NOS and mood disorder NOS, or is there a difference?
I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah. Any other? Yep.
I asked this question because I'm a grad student who studies how sugar affects the brain and body. You said that sugar is the death of you. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. Sugar, for me, the more sugar that I eat, the more depressive episodes I have. It really puts me into a state like after the sugar has left my body, I just feel like absolute shit. And mentally I feel like shit, physically I feel like shit, and overall I feel like shit. So it really affects me. I think it affects a lot of people with just generalized depression in general, sugar. The elevated state is nice for a minute, but I'm just speaking from my own personal experience and from my friends' experiences, but I think the people who suffer from depression in any state, in any form, are more sensitive to sugar. I would bet that if there was a study out there, that they would find that correlation. Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? Anybody else? So dual diagnosis, yay! Double Winners Club. I am part of the Double Winners Club. About 56% of individuals with bipolar who participated in a national study had experienced drug or alcohol addiction during their lifetime. So my psychiatrist is actually on the forefront of dual diagnosis. I'm not sure, a lot of you guys are in a grad program, so you might have heard her name. I don't know, her name's Dr. Modair. She's appeared on The Doctors. She has a lot of high-profile clients, but she's been the best doctor I've ever had in my entire life. And she's putting out her second book on dual diagnosis, and I actually asked her for a bunch of information for this presentation, and she freely gave it to me. So approximately 46% of the group that had abused alcohol or were addicted to alcohol. About 41% had abused drugs or were addicted to drugs. Alcohol is the most commonly abused substance among bipolar individuals. So these are facts, and I'll go through some of them because there's like 40 of them, but I won't go through all of them. People who have bipolar disorder are 2.2 times more likely to develop a substance abuse problem. So a lot of the times it's very difficult to diagnose people who are newly sober because the detox process could take up to 6 months, and the signs of the detox, getting all this stuff out of your system, and the craziness that people who are newly getting sober go through with dealing with life on life's terms without drugs and alcohol could mimic bipolar behavior. So I think that was a big thing for me because every time I'd get sober, they would diagnose me bipolar 2, and I'm like, no. I'm like, I am just crazy right now because I'm getting sober. Like, this is not who I am. And I really thought that my personality was that was my personality, that's just who I was. And I had it stuck in my head based on what my father had told me, that I was not bipolar, because was just unacceptable. Let's see. Question?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Number 2, the average age for when bipolar begins is 25. Is that when bipolar begins or is diagnosed?
Well, I would say begins. There are a lot of people who in their teens who have it, but it takes a number of years. Actually, no, I'm sorry. Diagnosed, not begins.
Okay.
A lot of people in their teens, but it's hard to diagnose individuals who are teenagers who have bipolar, because a lot of it will present as ADHD, so it's not really caught. But a lot of the psychotic breaks that happen for bipolar 1 happen in their mid-20s. And so that's generally speaking, so I guess it's twofold, if that makes any sense. So it's both. It's both. Any other questions? Yeah.
Along with that, do you know when the average age it begins or symptoms start showing is?
I know that there are, in the research that I've conducted or that I've looked at, like as young as 11 years old. Yeah, so you can start having symptoms, but they don't diagnose it until later.
Right.
Because it's like, okay, they're still not, they want to make sure, yes. Anybody else? Okay, bipolar disorder is the 6th leading cause of disability in the world today. I find it interesting that, I don't know if you guys fill out a lot of job applications, but when you fill out a job application, it's listed on there if the company is asking you to go through the disability part of the form, bipolar disorder is listed there as a disability. So it's very serious. And I know that I'm more comfortable today than ever talking about my diagnosis, but I would never mark off, I don't think publicly or like to a stranger, like I would put down that I'm bipolar, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, I think it's weird that it's on there. So 80%, that's the percentage of people with bipolar disorder who will contemplate suicide at least once in their lives. In general population, only 1 in 12 people will contemplate a suicide attempt. So the way that my bipolar manifests for me, I told you, severe depressive episodes that come with suicidal ideations. So unmedicated. When I'm unmedicated, I will think about suicide 3 times an hour all day long. And medicated, I still have suicidal ideations, but they're not compulsive, and they're not as intrusive as they had been previously. I owned guns at one point, and I got rid of them. So I just kind of, I don't keep things around in the house that would make it easy for me to go that route, just because I know that I've been there before. I have attempted it twice. So I keep my apartment and my place, weapon-free, so to speak. And I obviously don't have drugs in the house, and I don't have alcohol in the house. So it would be difficult for me to go out and commit suicide, basically. And that's just some of the things I have to do to protect my own self. Because I know reality, like there's a reality part of it, and then there's the bipolar part of it. In reality, I know how selfish suicide is. I know that's not the answer. I know all of this stuff. But when I'm in it, it's like I'm in it. And the only thing I can think about is leaving the planet. So I take it very seriously, obviously, that part of it. Okay, next slide. Okay, so to answer one of your questions over there in the corner, 20% of adolescents with major depression develop bipolar disorder within 5 years of the onset of their depression. So that adds a little bit more to the question that you were asking before. Out of the 3.4 million children under the age of 18 that are diagnosed with depression in the US, up to 1.1 million of them may actually be suffering from the first stages of early onset bipolar disorder. People with bipolar disorder face up to 10 years of coping with symptoms before getting an accurate diagnosis. That is 100% true, which really sucks. It's very difficult to get an accurate diagnosis, and especially difficult if you're not willing to accept it. So that's very, very true. I have been on probably every antidepressant out there known to man. I kid you not, I could be a psychiatrist. Okay? I recently started talking to this girl, and she's a doctor of psychology, and she's talking about the medications that she's on. And I was like, oh, why are you on that? Like, I'm like, shouldn't you be taking this? Like, why would you be? I'm like, oh my God, I'm ridiculous. Okay, ridiculous. Yeah, up to 17% of people with bipolar disorder will take their lives as a result of their illness, making it the #1 cause of premature death in people with this disorder. And 51% of the percent is a percentage of people with bipolar disorder that are believed to be receiving no treatment for their condition over the course of any year. Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously some good facts out there, and there's some good facts here. I won't read them all; it'd be pretty boring. But I do find that very interesting that it is about a 10-year process to figure out your accurate diagnosis. Okay, next. The average person with bipolar disorder will have 4 episodes of depression or mania in their first decade of their illness. 100% accurate, speaking from my own experience. Yeah, the average number of doctors it takes for someone to finally receive a diagnosis of bipolar disorder is 4, which is totally true. And 50% of those who receive treatment for their bipolar disorder will experience lingering symptoms or a full-blown relapse. And I absolutely have lingering symptoms. Yeah, okay, next slide. Okay. All right, in young people, there are 25 suicide attempts for every completed suicide. In the elderly population demographics, there are 4 suicide attempts for every completed one. Non-fatal injuries due to self-harm cost an estimated $2 billion annually for medical care. And there's more than $4 billion in lost wages and productivity that occurs annually because of suicide attempts. And 4.5 million, that's the estimated number of survivors of suicide that are living in the United States right now. Okay, you can go to the next one. Okay, so bipolar rage. Has anybody in here experienced bipolar rage? Yeah. How does that manifest for you?
I don't know, I don't necessarily have like super clear memories, but it's kind of a lot of like getting incredibly upset over things that in retrospect have mattered almost not at all,
Okay.
and then getting angry in whatever way that might be.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's basically what I cover in here. It's a side of bipolar disorder that's very long time, has a very long time passed under the radar screen. Many people with bipolar say that uncontrollable anger has destroyed their marriages, families, and personal relationships, ruined their careers, and left them emotionally isolated. An ongoing debate in psychiatric circles revolves around whether people who get very angry or irritable during depression are at higher risk for developing bipolar disorder, or in fact already had the disorder. Some recent studies have explored the question. Hold on. 2012 study involving more than 500 people found that those with bipolar, either type 1 or type 2, are more likely to be argumentative, feel hostile towards others, have hot tempers, and act out than those without the disorder, especially during a mood episode. There's also a greater likelihood of anger escalating quickly, resulting in sudden explosive outbursts. Okay, next. Sleep is one of the most sensitive earlier markers of a shifting mood. Even one night of sleep can be a trigger, which I spoke about before. Sleep is, amazing, very, very important to me. I absolutely have to get 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. I know this. I go to bed at 8:30 at night. I'm old, okay? I fall asleep to crime shows still. Anybody watch Forensic Files in here? Oh yeah, that guy's voice is so soothing. So yes, I fall asleep to murder, okay? But it's the voice of the narrator that really helps me go to sleep at night. Clinical research demonstrates that cognitive behavioral stress management training can help people learn to reduce hostility and anger. Here's an exercise from the Williams Life Skills program that goes by the mnemonic, I am worth it. And then this probably goes a little bit to what you were saying as far as being insignificant and acting and being rageful regardless. Is the situation important to you? A, is your anger appropriate given the facts of the situation? M, is the situation modifiable? And worth it. Is taking action worth it? Okay, next. So, as far as bipolar rage is concerned, I got into a lot of trouble when I was in high school and also in college with the rage. I experienced differently than bipolar 1. Bipolar 1, a lot of my friends who have bipolar 1 describe it as part of their, when they're coming down off of their mania, and they're highly agitated in a highly agitated state. And it's absolutely ruined relationships. Brooke, my friend who I was talking to, whose story I shared, her marriage fell apart because it wasn't necessarily the mania and the depression, but it was her bipolar rage that really became a scary, scary thing for her husband at the time. I really identify with this, and I'll tell you, when I was in high school, I tried to run over one of my friends because she made me so angry. It was over something so insignificant, and that's just kind of how it manifests as far as bipolar rage is concerned. It was over something, she may have said something that ticked me off or whatever it was, and I just decided I was gonna just run her over. And there's no humor in that whatsoever. It's just I was unmedicated and I was in a blind rage. And I would go into these blind rages. I got into a lot of fights, and I got into a lot of trouble in school. I got into a lot of I got into a lot of problems with work, different jobs I had, and my family. Me and my sister are not speaking. We haven't spoken since probably about 8 months ago. And the family unit is what is really affected by this mostly. She has told me that she can't deal with my rage issues anymore. And I haven't had any rage issues with her for a couple of years, because I've been medicated, but I guess she just decided at this point in her life that she doesn't want to risk it anymore, and she doesn't believe that I'm a changed individual. And she tells me that throughout my entire life with her, my rage and the way I treated her was unacceptable. And and she's right. You know, I raged at my parents, I raged at my siblings, I raged at my teachers. So that was a huge component for me as far as the bipolar rage goes. And in relationships, one, you know, I was very verbally abusive in relationships. That's also how it manifests for me. So I've done a lot of work on myself since then, since becoming more aware of that issue. The medication absolutely helps with that. I don't really experience the rage anymore. It also might be because I'm old. I mean, I'm tired. I don't have the energy to rage, you know what I mean? There's a lot of energy. It takes energy to do that. So, yeah, so. Yeah, yeah. The older ones, the super older ones that like I come across some like old people, like elderly who definitely like to rage. I'm just like, calm down, man, calm it down. So in conclusion, bipolar 1 disorder is diagnosed by at least one manic episode and usually experiences depressive episodes. Bipolar 2 disorder, hypomania with depressive episodes. Cyclothymic disorder, cyclical disorder, oscillating between hypomania and dysthymia. I think that's the last slide, but I have other things I discussed, but I would like to open up to some questions. Yeah.
How long did it take you?
To find the medication combination that worked for you.
All my life.
Okay.
I kid you not, I have been on every antidepressant known to man, but you have to understand I was also very, I did not want to accept my bipolar, so the doctors listened to me. I manipulated doctors all my life. I manipulated them to get the drugs that I wanted to get, and I would present symptoms knowing that they would prescribe me a certain type of medication. So I was on regular antidepressants for most of my life, and which obviously does not work for bipolar disorder. So it was really up until I tried Lamictal for the first time, which was probably about 4 years ago. As soon as I went on Lamictal, like, it was a game changer for me. It was life-changing. I didn't ever think that there was anything out there that was going to actually do anything for me. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to take it. I got severe high fevers, and I stopped taking. I had to go to the hospital, and I stopped taking it. And then a year later, my other doctor, who I've now tried to put me back on it again, same thing. I got these crazy high fevers from it. So I would say the combination of medication I'm on currently right now, I've been the most stable that I've ever been in my entire life. The one thing I don't like about it is that it does deaden my personality a little bit, and I don't experience like certain levels of excitement anymore. I'm just kind of like, eh. Right. Okay, but it keeps me out of the severe suicidal depressive episodes, and it also keeps me from going and buying motorcycles. Right. Okay. So, what other questions we got? Yeah, go ahead.
What exactly is dysthymia?
Severe depression. Depressive episodes.
Well, yeah, isn't dysthymia like lower than severe major depressive? Yeah. So
Yeah.
It's not usually severe. It's more like depressed.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just the opposite of mania or hypomania. It's just the bottom part of it. What else we got? Yep.
Regarding rage, do you have any like coping strategies to like if you feel it coming or like while you're in it?
Yes, and I would feel it coming on. It would like start at my toes, and it just creeps up, and my face would get red, and then I would go blind. And so before that period started, because I had to learn as an adult, you know, like when I was in college, I can get away with it. When I was in high school, I was obviously able to get away with it. But as an adult, dealing with adult things, I had to learn the coping mechanisms, and the first number one thing I learned was to walk away. Just be like, can I just take 5 minutes? Can you give me 5 minutes? 5 minutes. Go on a walk outside. That will usually give me, or at least for me, it give me the time to bring it down past my eyes to where I can see clearly again, and the blindness would subside, and I'd realize, okay, am I really going to is this really that big of a deal? And I talk to myself, is it really this big of a deal for me to fly off the handle with this? And if I needed more time, then I would take more time. Unfortunately, certain situations I can recall at work where before I was in my current career, where that doesn't work, where someone, they don't respect boundaries. So if you say, I need 5 minutes, they're like, no, then the rage would just come. Taking those 5 minutes for me were crucial. Just taking a minute to walk away from whatever it is that you were feeling at that moment in order to bring down the levels somewhat. Who else? You guys gotta have some, okay?
You had talked earlier about being completely sober,
Mm-hmm.
and now that it's legal, I was wondering, have you heard of any research being done with CBD oils? So there's no psychoactives in it as far as mood stabilizers?
I've heard little bits of that. I've also heard a little bit about ketamine.
Okay.
Um,
I've heard about ketamine.
yeah,
for depression.
so, yeah, and I don't mess with any of that stuff. Yeah, it's just too slippery of a slope for me.
Okay.
I would possibly consider the CBD oil because I know that there are no properties for it. So I would consider that if my doctor felt that it was something that would actually help me. I haven't had that discussion with her, but it is something that I probably will bring up at some point, just because I still do suffer from the depressive episode. So I'm still totally open to manipulating my medication in order to get it to the right thing. And the way I see it is the medication is like, sometimes it'll work for a period of time, then it stops working. You know, and then you got to, change things up and add new things. And as far as medication is concerned, it's like a key. You have a whole key ring going on, and it's just that one key that's going to unlock the door. And you got to find that one key, and it's a major process. It's a huge process. What else we got? Yeah.
Have we seen diagnosis rates for bipolar, all types, increase in recent years? I may have missed that earlier.
I don't know if I had that on the thing. I don't think that there was an increase. It was just the most recent study as far as the bipolar rates were concerned. But I don't believe that it identified any increase over previous years or anything like that. Yeah, no. So how many of you guys are in grad school? At UC Davis? Okay. And how many undergrad? Oh, shit. Okay. And are you guys all studying mental health? No? Some of you, some of yes, some no. So who are studying mental health? And from somebody who's not studying mental health, why are you here? Okay.
I do nutritional biology, and I work in a stress biology lab, so I look at how food affects hormones and the brain and how it's all interconnected.
Ah,
Neuroendocrinology.
that's super interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about it because I absolutely, I went vegan.
I'm a dietitian as well.
Oh,
So I
okay.
food. I look at food behind why we eat what we eat.
That's amazing because I absolutely think that food is a huge component in it. And I believe strongly that food is a major component in recovery as far as detoxing is concerned and getting sober. If any of you guys have a drug or alcohol problem and an eating disorder problem, just know that if you go to treatment for it, it's very difficult, okay? Because when you're detoxing, you want to eat. And so that was a very difficult time in my life. Talk about bipolar rage coming out. When my food was restricted a little bit, I was a binge eater. I was a binge eater and exercise bulimic. So I would binge like a football player, and then for the next couple days, I'd restrict about 500 calories and then work out 6 hours a day. And I was miserable. I hated myself. It was the lowest point in my life, I think, having an eating disorder. Out of all the disorders which I've had, look, if there was a box of hair sitting right there, I would get addicted to it, okay? I swear I have that personality. But the lowest addiction / disorder that I've ever experienced that was co-occurring with my bipolar was my eating disorder. And it was probably one of the hardest things for me to give up. But I've been abstinent from it for 7 years and completely sober for 7 years, other than my medications. So yeah, what other questions? Anything else? Yeah.
So you said that you went vegan. How does that affect your eating disorder recovery?
Oh, for me, my bottom line behavior is no binging. No binging and no excessive exercise. So it's not, no, the restrictive, I went vegan because I watched too many videos. I swear, that's the only reason why. And I went to this place called the Gentle Barn. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it, but they have these farm animals up there. And there's this farm animal named Buttercup. And it's a cow. She's a cow. And these cows, they play with like balls and stuff, and then you get to lay down and cuddle with the cow and pet it, and they play with each other and stuff. I'm like, I can't eat this anymore. That was it. And then all the other horrible videos that I watched. So it's not a dietary thing for me. It's behavioral more for the animals, yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry if I missed this, we weren't here for the whole session, but in regards to like substance abuse, have you had issues with that? And if so, like, at what point would you say like you realized you wanted to quit?
Okay, so the first time I really realized I had a problem, even though I was institutionalized when I was 15 for, attempted suicide, but I was also using marijuana at the time. At 17, I was institutionalized for methamphetamine. So at 17, I realized I had an issue, kind of. I still fully didn't believe that I was an alcoholic or an addict. I was in a relationship for 8 years. I used to own a mortgage and real estate company before getting into fitness 10 years ago. And I lost everything as a result of the market crashing. My girlfriend, when we were in a relationship, she was an alcoholic and I was a big pill popper. Like, pills were my thing. After the last treatment stint with meth, I switched from street drugs to pills. They're much easier to get at the time. I would point the finger at her and say that she was an alcoholic, and she would say I was a pillhead, and I'm like, forget it, like, you're the problem, and she's like, you're the problem. And it was when that relationship terminated, I couldn't blame her anymore for my own unhappiness. I couldn't blame her alcoholism, and I had to take responsibility for the fact that I absolutely was an addict. And part of the reason why I did fail, that mortgage company did deteriorate, was, yes, because of the market, but also because of my addiction. So I lost everything. I was bankrupt. So to answer your question, it was around that time. I also ended up homeless in sobriety after the stint that I was in treatment. After I got out of the psychiatric institution, I spent all my money on treatment, and me and that girlfriend ended up breaking up, the one who's been in 27 institutions. You know, I was finally like, okay, you gotta go. I ended up homeless, living out of my car for a number of months, but I stayed sober. So this time around, for me, my sobriety I put first ahead of anything else. And that's the only way that I was able to maintain my sobriety was like, okay, no matter what. So I'm living in my car, but I'm sober today. That's the only thing that matters to me. And so for me, that's what it's been. I also tattooed the Serenity Prayer on my arm. That was my first tattoo before I got my sleeve. And the reason why I did that was because I'm like, okay, if I relapse, I'm gonna look at this thing and be like, you're a fucking idiot. Okay, you have this on your arm and your sobriety date on your arm and you relapsed, you know? So it's part of my ego that kept, you know, so yeah. What else, what other questions? Yeah.
If we have a friend or a colleague that we think might be bipolar, how would you recommend we kind of approach them to ask about it or to bring up the topic?
Have they ever acknowledged that they have any mental illness at all?
Let's assume they haven't.
Okay,
Like,
so
just hypothetical, I'm kind of wondering, like, if we have a friend and we're like, it seems kind of manic, like.
I would sit them down.
Okay.
And has it affected anybody's lives around them?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've noticed and you're starting to worry about, you know, behaviors.
That's what I would say. Just like, you know, this is what I've noticed. I'm concerned, come from a very compassionate place.
Okay.
This is what I'm noticing, and this is how it makes me feel.
Okay.
So bring it also back to yourself.
Okay.
So it's not so much like you're
Not pointing fingers.
yeah, pointing fingers. Be like, I'm feeling fear for you,
Okay.
or it makes me, uneasy or uncomfortable or whatever it is. Like, can you explain, are you aware of this behavior? Do you even know that this is happening? Because this is what we're noticing. But make it very, no finger pointing.
Okay.
Yeah, more inclusive as far as like bringing it back to yourself.
Okay.
And identifying feelings that you're feeling in association with the behavior.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So now, given everything that you said, how has your recovery been connected to your organization?
Right. So I started the nonprofit in a hypomanic episode. Okay. Okay, I was not properly medicated, and it was after the Paris attack at the Bataclan. Does you guys remember that one? So everybody was posting up pictures of Paris flag, and it was pissing me off. I'm like, that's not doing anything. What is that doing? People put on their Facebook page like, oh, I'm going to post the Paris flag. Yeah, that's going to do something. I decided at that moment that I wanted to create something that was going to help the world, okay? Because I was in that hypomanic state, and I was right below mania, I think, because I was like, you have all these grandiose ideas of what you're going to do to accomplish and to save fucking humanity. So I started that based on that premise, that to do something tangible. My idea at the time was to do something tangible within your own backyard, like whether it's picking up trash, whether it's delivering meals to the home to the elderly, whether it's setting up, apps on the elderly's phone, just something. Everybody needed to do something within their own community in order to help make the world a better place. And then I decided that I really wanted to. I was dealing a lot with my mental illness, and my other friends were having mental illness, and I thought that was a little bit more close to home. So I switched the premise to that. But I started that in a hypomanic episode. I built the website, put up all the content, applied for the nonprofit. We are a 501c3, so I started that application along with the application for the corporation, all within a matter of 48 hours. And so I had the website up, I had all the applications out, I had an appointment to do it. I did another promo reel, just like this for the other one, within 48 hours. And then I crashed and burned, and I didn't look at the nonprofit for like months. So then I got on medication. So yeah, I start businesses. I started my mortgage company in a hypomanic episode. The woman that I was working for at the time, I'm looking at her, I'm like, if she can do it, I can do this. So I went home, literally sent out all the applications to the lenders and all that kind of stuff, and had a mortgage company within 3 days. And then it crashed and burned again. So I start companies, and I buy motorcycles. In my hypomania, that's how my hypomania manifests itself. I'm lucky, I guess. I don't have, I don't do. At my age, I guess, or in the last 5, 6 years, I haven't done anything super damaging compared to what I did earlier on. So, okay. So, anything else you guys have? Yeah.
I have a friend of mine, and he has bipolar disorder, and I was just wondering, like, if he ever has like an episode or has like a rage while he's like around me or someone else. Like, what do you think would be the best way I can help him, or just like, should I just let him go?
If he's in is he bipolar 1?
I'm not really sure.
Does he talk like he's on another planet when he's manic?
I've never been around him when he has that kind of episode.
Well, let me ask you. You're bipolar 1, right? So how would you like to be approached if you were in a manic episode?
I mean, it's hard to approach someone because what they're believing is completely real.
Yeah.
And the world they're in is completely genuine. It's really hard to bring them back down to earth. But at the same time, obviously I'm not going to want to take my medication. I'm not going to want to go to the psych ward. I'm not going to want to do those things. And I'm not sure, honestly, how I want to do it.
So I had a situation similar, a friend who was in a full-blown mania, completely out of touch with reality, and she thought that the pins in her house had cameras in them, all the pins, and they were video recording her. She thought that people were breaking into her house and writing in her big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was actually her handwriting, and I was over there. And I was really concerned, so I had a safe word for my friend, and I took a friend over there. It was kind of like a 12-step call. And I said, okay, we're going to use a safe word in case it's a little out of control, that we're going to call the police. And she started escalating, and I used the safe word, and we ended up calling the police, just to cover our own self and make sure that she was safe and make sure that she was properly cared for. And if the police felt that she was in danger of herself or somebody else, then they could have 5150'd her. But I couldn't do that, so I don't know if that helps. Yeah.
I guess kind of like we were saying, like, pick your battles, you know? Like, if you can't argue with everything they're saying, and if what they're saying doesn't make sense, but it's fine, it's safe, it's not going to hurt them or you, let them think it. But if they're getting dangerous or spiraling out of control, then that's when you know, try and argue with them, and if you can't and it's going too far, then that's when you get to where.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, back.
I work for Turning Point Community Programs in Yolo County, and the mental health office offers first aid training. For anyone, it's free. Also, there's a lot of events at NAMI, and there's also Eventbrite you can register for how to react and respond appropriately in those situations.
Okay, perfect. That's a really good, that's awesome. Anything else? All right, well, it's been a pleasure speaking to you guys. I got a long drive back home, listening to some music. I listen to old people music. Yeah. Fleetwood Mac. Yeah, old people music, yeah. So you guys, this was really great. Thank you for being so attentive and for all your questions, and I hope you guys learned something. I'm hoping. I know that you guys are probably some of you are more expert than I am at this, but it was interesting. It was fun sharing my experience, my strength, and my hope through my story, and I hope that it reached some of you guys and maybe change some lives. I don't know. So thank you.